If you love shopping at places like Kirkland's, Pottery Barn, and Restoration Hardware, then you are going to love these Dollar Tree DIY dupes. I'm Jamie, the Crafty DIY guy. Everybody, my first dupe is from Anthropology. I saw this plant stand and was pretty obsessed and wanted to make my own version. So I took my Dollar Tree tomato cage and also a plastic bucket. This was actually left over from an Easter haul, and decided to make a plant stand with them. So the first thing I did was trim off these edges. You'll notice on your tomato cage that there's one side that is kind of rounded and it almost looks like feet, and then there's another end that is squared off. So you're going to actually cut the squared off ends of your tips off here. And then what you're going to just simply start to do is remove the kind of wire circles that are on there. And then once you've done that, go ahead and start to flatten out that end that you clipped off with your wire cutters. And I flattened it about, I would say about 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches. And what you're going to do is you're going to slightly bend this at a curve, but you want to be very, very careful with this because these will snap. They are very thin metal, and you don't want to mess up one of your legs. And then when you get done, they all should be about like this. So they should kind of be a similar angle, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then the next thing you're going to do is, you can see where I used a red Sharpie and just kind of marked the bucket spot, and all I'm doing is taking my janky tube of E6000 and just making a return appearance, and I'm putting some glue on there. That way I can kind of make sure, one, that this is going to stay, because this is going to go out on my front porch, and regular glue will actually melt in the heat, so we don't want that with summer coming. So again, I added some hot glue to that because it does help speed up that process of that E6000 drying. And then I literally just kind of lined it up with that little mark that I made and pushed it up against the side of the bucket, holding it until it was pretty firm in place, really about until I would say that hot glue started to dry. And then I grabbed that piece of duct tape that you can see kind of hanging there from the top of the bucket and used that to help kind of hold everything in place. That way it could dry and set up overnight. I wanted to make sure that this was good and solid, so I just put that tape up above where all that glue was. That way the tape wouldn't glue to the bucket. And then just set it aside, and you can see I kind of repeated it on the 3 sides of the bucket. Then the next part was to go ahead and put some decorative trim along the bottom of the bucket. This is going to also help reinforce those legs and keep those legs sturdy. So I took some nautical rope. I unfortunately just have some scraps. So I had one piece of regular nautical rope, and it was enough to go completely around the bucket. So I went ahead and I did that first. And then I decided that I would use some of my nautical rope scraps, or some of my pieces. So I've got these pieces. You know how when you separate a piece of nautical rope and it kind of gives you 3 little medium-sized ropes? That's what I have here. And then again, I can go around the bucket about 3 or 4 times, I would say. And then the last thing I thought that I might do, just to add a little bit of a different kind of look to it, is I actually have some Dollar Tree twine. So I thought between the thicker nautical rope and then this rope, and then also the twine, that would give it a nice look once everything was wrapped. And so this is kind of what it looks like. I am going to be spray painting over this. I would recommend that you burn your threads off of your rope before you spray paint. I didn't do that, and so it looks a little wonky. And then go ahead and chop these things off with your clippers. I just used my pink shears from Dollar Tree. Now, once you've got the glue rope already done, you can go ahead and remove your duct tape and get this ready for painting, because between the E6000 and hot glue, and now the rope and the twine that's all been glued on top of this is going to be pretty sturdy. The next thing that I did is kind of stand it up to make sure it was balanced, and you can kind of see how it's going to look. I think it's really cute already, and of course she needs a paint job, so we're going to take her outside, give her a little Botox, give her a little freshening up, and it'll look great when it's done. So I took it outside. I spray painted it bright orange because I wanted it to go really well with my front porch and everything that's out on my front porch now. She took a lot of work. Let me tell you, this was probably about 4 coats of orange paint. That plastic bucket pattern was showing through really, really easy. And that was on the outside and the inside of this bucket. So I just kind of took my time with it. I let it dry all day long. It was a beautiful sunny day, so I didn't have to worry about weather. And I literally just put a nice coat on, sprayed the legs, worked my way around the bucket, and then when that dried, I would flip it over, do the inside, etc. All right, so this is what it looks like. How adorable is this? It goes perfectly with my rug that you can see there in the background. It holds my plant really nicely. This is just a plastic pot inside of here. And again, I am so happy with this little plant stand. The next time I can go to a Dollar Tree, I'm gonna grab more of these tomato cages and make so many more of these. All right, guys, the next dupe is this Saturn Bowl that I fell in love with for $80 at Anthropologie. And of course, there was no way I was going to pay $80 for it, so I decided to make my own. I grabbed a garden bowl from Dollar Tree that I had in my stash, and then these are the tomato cage rings that were left over from the previous project. So I am going to use these guys to make my Saturn Bowl from Anthropologie. And I think I can do it pretty easily. So the next thing I did was take my glue gun and just drill or burn the holes in the side of the bowl. I did 3 holes going down and then 3 holes on the opposite side. So hopefully that makes sense. When you see me put the rods in, you'll understand. And then this was just starting to put the rods in. I put them in and then also glued them in on both sides of the bowl. It looks a little thick and goopy, but it's okay because once you paint them, it actually looks really good and it looks like welded metal, depending, of course, on what kind of paint that you're using. But again, it was pretty easy to do and wasn't a bad time at all. So again, just kind of burning those holes in there and then going back through and touching it up with the glue and making sure each level was set before you moved on. And then this is what it looks like before it's been painted. Again, I think this is a pretty good copy. So I went ahead and wanted to put feet on mine. I didn't have the patience for the kind of longer stick legs that one had, so I just glued these wood beads on the bottom. And then I took it outside and spray painted it with some bronze hammered paint, and I love this. I really, really love this. I saved myself $80, and this was basically like $2 to make, minus, of course, the succulents and the rocks that are already in there. All right, guys, and then the very last project is from Pier 1. I saw this gold mirror and loved it. I took a wire ring that I had left over from an old project. This is also from a tomato cage. And I just kind of figured out that I could string some of these gorgeous beads on it. I had a Dollar Tree mirror and I had the paper plate, which added a kind of a cool texture. These metallic beads are from Dollar Tree as well. And they're something that I saw at Crafter Square right before COVID-19, so I grabbed some. The first thing I did was take my paper plate and just kind of flatten it out a little bit more. The center mirror is not a perfect fit within here, so kind of flattening out the plate a little bit helped it. And then I took my mirror, and this is kind of where you'll see like a big bonehead move here. I glued the mirror and everything down to the paper plate, and then kind of was like, oh yeah, I probably need to be able to remove that mirror because I have to paint all of this. So that was a little bit of an oopsie on my end. I ended up grabbing more glue and then I figured it out. So I just took the frame off and then just kind of carefully removed this mirror from here. It's not horrible to remove this, so luckily that came off without breaking. And then I took everything outside to spray paint it. And I purposely did not glue the frame down because then I would have to pry it off when I had to put the mirror back in there. While I while the paint was drying, I went ahead and strung the silver beads. I didn't have enough glue or enough gold paint to be able to do this. So I decided to just go with this silver metallic instead. So my version of this mirror is going to be silver. And I just strung these beads on this wire, and it was really easy to do. I bent the end of one of the wires, that way the beads would stay on there. And then you'll see kind of as I was working my way towards the end of this, I just put a dab of hot glue on the end of that just to hold all of those beads on there. And now you can kind of see how it's going to almost go around the framed mirror. Now that center piece of that wire that's holding that frame together, and that did hold that wire together, I ended up cutting that off. And here I just put a little bit more glue because I was afraid that these things were going to fly off and go across the room. And then I figured out that I could just cut the tip of that wire off where that clamp is, and it would be totally fine. Now this is what everything looks like after it's been spray painted. I love this silver metallic spray paint. This is actually from Ace Hardware, and it's, again, a pretty cool paint, and I use it in a lot of stuff. So this is the one that I grabbed, and it's super cool. So now it was time to go ahead and just glue my mirror back to the cardboard frame that I had hot glued down before. So I tried to make sure that this was pretty centered, and you'll see it's a little off-centered, but I made it work. So again, I put a generous helping of hot glue down in the base here, which is probably why I couldn't move the mirror afterwards. And then I just glued everything back down. And then for the beaded kind of necklace, we'll call it, I just worked my way around with some hot glue. And this is what it looks like as well. I love this mirror. This is kind of the silver version. The one from Pier 1 is gold, but again, I think it's a perfect complement. I'm going to be using a package of these foam stars that I picked up at Pop Shelf. You can usually find these also at Dollar General and something similar at Dollar Tree. You're only going to need 2 of them, and you want to do 2 that are the same size. I also grabbed one of these over-the-door coat hangers in black. If you can't find one in black, you could certainly spray paint it black, but this one's going to work out perfectly. So the first thing I did was take my stars out, and I grabbed 2 that were the exact same size. These are kind of the medium out of the 3 different sizes that are in this bag, so those are the ones I am going to use for this DIY. Because these stars are kind of 3-dimensional, I do want to have a nice flat surface for these to be able to glue to that coat hanger. So I'm just going to take a little saw here that I grabbed from my toolbox. I almost said my tool belt. And I'm just going to shave off the side of the star here just a little bit, just so I have a nice flat surface for this to stick to. The next thing I'm going to do is take some Mod Podge and I'm going to pour it in my tray here. And I am going to paint both sides of these styrofoam stars with the Mod Podge. Sometimes paint will break down styrofoam. I know for sure spray paint will. And with this one, I'm going to be using a combination of some acrylic paint. I'm going to be using some antiquing wax and some chalk paint. So I want to make sure that these stars are not going to fall apart. I said follow apart. Isn't that hilarious? So after I've given both of my stars 2 coats of Mod Podge, then it is time to start working on the first part of the paint. Then I'm going to use my Craft Smart acrylic paint, and I'm going to give each one of my stars 2 coats of paint on both sides. Now, once the paint had dried on those stars, I loved the way they looked, but it was time to start giving them kind of a bronzy wood finish. So I'm going to take some antiquing wax and this chip brush, and admittedly, I did go a little heavy on this very first star, but I was able to kind of correct it. I would probably do more of a dry brush technique, I would think, than doing something quite as heavy as this. Typically with antiquing wax, I will go very, very heavy when I use this, but with this project, a lighter hand would have definitely done better. Now, as you can see, as I'm using that chipper brush, it is kind of pulling and putting some texture on that star, which I really, really like. Now, this is kind of how I would have preferred, I think, to start off that first star. And as you can see, it almost gives it a wood grain kind of a look. And obviously the styrofoam styrofoam has some texture in it as well. And all I'm going to do is just continue to build up my layers of paint using the antiquing wax, and then going in with some black chalk paint, and then adding some white back into it, and then just literally building upon my layers and layers and layers until I have the color that I like. After everything dried, then I took my hot glue gun out and I added a generous amount of hot glue right to the top of my over-the-door coat rack. I took my styrofoam stars and that flat area that I had carved out earlier and just glued those down directly on top of that metal like so. When everything dried, I had a fantastic over-the-door coat rack that I loved so much that had a very cool modern industrial look. The next thing I'm going to be doing is making a wood and gemstone garland with a rope tassel on the end of it. I found these citrine beads that are actually rough cut, raw, genuine citrine beads. They look like this. They come on a strand kind of like this on Amazon, and I loved these so much. And I went ahead and just cut the beads that you see on my mat there off of this strand. And again, super fun. My brown beads that you see here, they're a dark Kona color, and these are actually from Michaels. I have 4 different sizes here. And then this is just a piece of twine that I had that was also from Michaels. You could certainly use any kind of twine or thread or anything that you have. I took some of the Dollar Tree black nylon rope and just kind of created a tassel by wrapping this around my pencil, kind of like you see here, and then just tying it off. And I loved the way that this looked. It was pretty cool for me to be able just to keep everything in place. And then I'll show you a little trick that I learned here. So I'm going to take, and unfortunately I'm doing it off camera there, but I took a little bit of glue. I put it on the end of my pencil here, and then I'm going to take my twine or my thread here, and I am going to glue it to that pencil kind of like so. It's on low temperature, so don't worry, I didn't burn my hands, even though my hands are really, really dirty from doing painting earlier. And then I'm going to pull my pencil through, and look at that. My tassel is threaded. All I have to do is just cut this now off of the end of the pencil, and I've got that thread all ready to go. Now I did take my twine and I knotted it together at the top of that tassel, and then I took my 2 ends and just cut them off now. Now I'm going to pick a citrine bead that already has those holes threaded through it, and I'm going to take my twine and just thread it through, bringing that citrine bead really, really close to the top of that tassel. But to help kind of thread these along, I am going to add some hot glue on the end of my thread, and that will help this beading or this threading process of my citrine. As you can see with my dirty fingers from painting earlier, it does go through, and then I can pull that all the way down to the end there and just thread my citrine bead kind of like so. So after I double threaded that one citrine bead, then I separated my strings again, and so I had 2 different threads. Hopefully that's making sense. I think it'll make sense once you see how everything starts to come together. Now I'm going to pick the right stone and figure out kind of what 2 are about the same size, and then I'm going to thread one stone through on one side of the thread. And then I'm going to take the other stone and do it with the other side of the thread. That way, those 3 stones are all kind of joined together. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute once everything is done. Also, just a little tip for you, whenever you're using anything, any kind of threading like this, it always helps to put a little bit of tape, or in my case, I'm using actually a little bit of hot glue on the ends of your thread, and then it will make threading a lot easier. So now that I've got those 3 stones, I think you can kind of see where I'm going here. And now I'm just going to create a pattern as I'm starting to thread my stones and my wood beads onto each one of my pieces here. And then when I had the desired length, I went ahead and just tied everything in a double knot at the end of my strand, joining everything together to create this amazing looking garland. I really love the way this wood and gemstone garland looks. I absolutely love how I doubled it up here and just put it around the neck of my vase. Another thing you can do with it is simply just use it to accent your tray. This would be fantastic on a tiered tray or on a coffee table tray like I have styled here. Again, super versatile, very, very earthy, and I love the way this looks. And for my next project, I'm going to be using some of these party favor blocks that you can find in the birthday party section at your local Dollar Tree. I also grabbed a package of these mini kind of appetizer plates. There's 12 of them to a package. You can use any of the extras for paint. So the first thing we did was take all of our party blocks. I took all 3 packages and I'm going to open them up and start building my blocks or my towers with them. To do that, all I'm going to do is start gluing them together. You could certainly glue these in the color blocks if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter because you're going to end up spray painting them. So I did one tower that was the tallest, and then I did a medium-sized tower, and then I did a small tower. And the great thing about these blocks is that they do open. That's, I guess, the party favor part of them, but the bad part of that for this project is that you will have to glue them shut as well. So go ahead and add some glue to the front where the kind of snaps are, and then to the tops to glue them into your individual stacks. And once you have everything glued and stacked on top of each other, it is time to add your little appetizer plates to the top. Once the glue dried, I took everything outside and gave it 2 coats of my black spray paint. I'm actually using a flat black versus a gloss or even a matte finish. This is totally your own preference, whichever you think is best. You could even spray paint these a lighter color or even a very cool metallic color, and I think they would be equally amazing. Once everything was dried, I took them inside and added some tea light candles, and this is what they look like. I love the way these look. They are definitely a focal point on my coffee table tray, and they give a very cool industrial modern vibe that I'm really, really into lately. And for my last project, we're going to be using 4 of these 5x7 Dollar Tree frames. I've already taken the glass out of them because that's actually what we're going to be using. You can put the frame part aside and save that. Also, I have these 5-inch wood squares, and that's important. You want to get a wood square that's going to be the same size as your glass, kind of like you see here. So go ahead and make sure whatever size wood that you're going to be using is the same size as the glass from the frames that you'll be using. I grabbed these wood slices from, or these wood pieces from Amazon, and I will link them in the description box below. I'm going to take a ruler here and I'm just going to draw a line, and then I'm going to take an X-Acto knife or this is the Dollar Tree version of that, and I'm just going to score my wood here 3 or 4 times with this X-Acto knife. If you have something that's a little heavy duty-er, then that would probably be better than what I was using here. I just went nice and slow. And again, I think I did this 3 or 4 times, kind of right along that line that I had just drawn. I probably could have even just kept the ruler there and just gone back and forth against that edge with that. But I just took my time. And then if you bend this, it will pop, as you will see here. And you may have to take some scissors and just kind of trim it up a little bit. I did that and it was perfectly fine. I did this to 4 pieces of wood, and I used the one that I'm trimming up here actually as my template. That way I had 4 pieces that exactly matched each other. So hopefully that makes sense. The next thing I'm going to do is take my 4 pieces of wood and rub them down with some antiquing wax. I'm using this chip brush, and I'm just going to give everything a good coating on both sides. And then I'm going to take my rag and just wipe away any of the excess, making sure that I have 4 pieces that are beautifully stained with my antiquing wax. The next thing I'm going to do is take my two pieces of wood and I am going to glue them onto my glass. So for the first two pieces, I'm actually going to glue them together kind of like so. That way I have two pieces of glass with two pieces of wood going in the same direction. And then I am going to do the same with the bottom two pieces of glass, but they're going to go in the opposite direction, as you see here. So hopefully that is making sense. That way, when I glue everything together, all of my pieces are going to match up. Once everything was dry, it was time to start assembling my box. The first thing I'm going to do is add some hot glue onto the glass and to the wood that is kind of overlapping there just a little bit. And then I'm going to join those corners together that match up. Remember, I have a high and a low side to each one of my pieces of glass. So that is kind of what I'm joining together. That way it kind of creates this really cool zigzag pattern. So again, matching up that high side with the other high side, making sure that everything is flush and as tight as possible, and then working my way around until I have the very last part together. Now, this is still not very sturdy, so you definitely want to reinforce this. Go ahead and add your glue. Add everything together, hold it in place until it does glue together, and then you want to go ahead and flip this upside down. Do this very, very carefully. Once you've done that, you can then add a base. I chose not to paint my base. This is totally up to you. If you want to paint this piece, then by all means, please do. It is not going to be seen. You're going to cover it up with a lot of stuff. And again, totally your call. Once everything was dry, then I added in some of these Dollar Tree wood birch pieces. I also added in some moss and some Dollar Tree rocks and some succulents to create the perfect tabletop succulent garden. I am so happy with the way this looks on my coffee table. This is something that I can keep out all year round. I also think that this would look fantastic on the mantle or even on a bookshelf. You're going to be doing a dupe of this Kirkland's pen holder. I saw this and immediately loved it, but did not love that $90 price point. I knew that I could easily recreate it with 4 of these Dollar Tree Crafter Square pen holders. If you're not able to find these, you could certainly use these small drawers. What I would do is just kind of flip them upside down, remove that drawer, and then you'll see they're just a little bit shorter, but they would work also just as well. Now, the great thing about Dollar Tree, of course, is the price point, but sometimes you can get some things that aren't exactly the same size, especially with something like this that you're trying to create. So go ahead and just kind of play around with it and then figure out which ones you're going to use. And then I'm going to take these 2 outside and spray paint them, and then I'm going to have 2 of them that I'm going to be using my antiquing wax on. And what I'm doing is just applying it using one of those makeup sponges, and I'm going with the grain of the wood. That's really important because these Crafter Square blocks are, they've got a really cool kind of wood grain to them, honestly. And if you do it with the grain, you'll notice that once you start wiping that excess antiquing wax off of there with the grain as well, you can see how those beautiful lines and those colors really start to develop. And I love the way this looks. I did go ahead and paint the inside of mine as well because I wanted them to have a high-end look. Now, I didn't film me spray painting the ones black, but as you can see, they're spray painted black. And now we're going to start gluing together our boxes. Now, to mimic the Kirkland's dupe, I'm going to be doing mine in a square. However, if you wanted to make these rectangular, that is really, really up to you. Now, the other tip that I will give you is that when you are dealing with these boxes that may not always be the perfect size or the exact same size, flip them upside down. And when you do that, you're going to make sure that you have a nice flat kind of top surface, if you will. The cool thing about these is that you can always add little felt tips or pads or something to the bottom of this to make this more even. I would rather have a very high-end look and have everything nice and flat at the top. I'm going to add some Surebond or wood glue to these and just glue the first 2 pieces together like so. And then I'm going to kind of flip that to the back and move it out of my way so I can add some more of this Surebond or wood glue to my box here, and then just hold these together and make sure that everything is glued together nice and tight. And then once that's all set, bit, then I'm going to take my foursome and we're going to glue those together as well. Once again, just kind of lining them up, making sure that we're nice and flat, adding a generous helping of my wood glue from Shore Bonder and gluing these together to make sure that they have the perfect hold so I can use this as a desk accessory. And then once everything is dry, flip it over and you've got a very high-end look that saved you about $86. And it is super, super cool. I love the way this looks. It holds a lot of different pens and pencils and markers and such, and it is the perfect addition to my desk. And for my next project, we're going to be using 4 of these signs that I picked up from Kroger, believe it or not. Kroger is my local grocery store, and these are wood. These are like solid wood. And I want to say I paid less than $1, or maybe they were $2 each. That's not less than $1, but you know what I mean. And then I had these Amazon letters that I grabbed. They are 5-inch letters, and I will link these below. I had enough to spell out the word kitchen, and I thought that this would be a cool gift for a friend of mine. So the first thing I did was just glue my blocks together end to end. And literally all I'm doing is gluing those together with my Shore Bonder wood glue. And then I'm going to add some stir sticks that I just kind of cut down. And it's really just to give it some additional stability. There's not much else to that. Once everything dried, I flipped it over on its side, and it looks something like this. For my letters, obviously, I have some here that were used from a previous project, but it's fine. I'm going to be spray painting all of this anyway. I'm making sure that everything is lining up properly. And by the way, those 4 blocks equals about 30 inches in total length. So if you wanted to recreate this, you easily could by just having a piece of board or something that was at least 30 inches. So I started with the K on the one end, and then I'm going to start with my N on the end of my sign. And I'm doing that just so I make sure that I have proper spacing. And then as you can see here, I'm going to start kind of working with the C in the middle and then gluing the letters kind of out from the C then. That way I have a pretty even, or at least equally even spaced. I took everything outside and I'm spray painting it now just with a flat black. I'm going to make this kind of very modern looking, if you will. And then once everything has dried, I took it inside. Now, this is displayed on my bar. It's actually too big for my kitchen, and my kitchen's a little messy, to be honest. But I wanted you to be able to see how this looks before I pass it on to a friend of mine. I do love the way this looks. I think that you could very easily hang this on the wall as well, and maybe add some hooks on the bottom of it. I think it'd be great for hanging aprons or maybe even some lightweight utensils. I think that there's a lot of versatility with it, and it's just super cool. Now, my next project is actually going to be a recycle. I picked up these vases at a thrift store. They were $1.25 each, and I really did love the shape of them. The color wasn't exactly within the color scheme of my house, or at least what I'm kind of going for. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a low grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to kind of go over the vases a little bit. This is really just to help remove any of the, dust or grime from them sitting around, and then also kind of to help remove some of that shiny coating that is sometimes on these. I'm going to be spray painting these with this Rust-Oleum metallic oil rubbed bronze spray paint that I really love so much. And literally, I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm not taping them off. I'm not doing any kind of thing like that because I just want these to look like 2 bronze vases. And as you can see, I'm just going over with a coat of spray paint. I literally only had to do 1 coat of spray paint, and I love the way that these look. This is what they look like inside on the bookshelf in my home. And again, super happy with the way these look. I think that they're super elegant looking and just very cool. And for my last DIY, I'm going to be creating one of those weighted poster frames at the top and at the bottom of this map. This is a cloth map that I purchased on Amazon. It was around $15. It's huge, and I really like the way it looks in my guest bedroom, but I needed to kind of jazz it up a little bit. So I went to my local hardware store and I bought some trim pieces. These are about 100 inches long, and I cut both of them down to 60 inches, which is the width of that map. I used this dark Kona wood stain, trying to film with one hand. And this is what the wood boards looked like when they were done. I thought they were absolutely gorgeous. And then I took this inside and started to assemble the map on the frame. And then to attach those boards, I'm just going to use my Surebonder staple gun here. All I'm going to do is literally just take this map and use that blue kind of hem mark as my guide. And I'm going to be stapling this down directly to the trim. My staples are short enough that it's not going to be an issue with my piece of wood here, so just make sure that you don't have any super long staples. And then once I did the top, I just flipped this over and I'm going to repeat the process on the bottom. Now the bottom, I am going to give it a little bit more room on the board itself. I'm stapling more of the fabric to that board because it is weighted, and if you don't do that, it's not going to hang properly. So I'm also taking now some nautical rope. I flipped it back over and went back to the top, by the way. And I'm just going to add a knot on the end of that nautical rope. And then I'm just going to staple this down on the end of the board, kind of like so. And then what I am going to do is repeat the process on the other end of it. And for the rope length itself, you're only going to use about the same length of the entire width of the rod. So it's about 60 inches. And you just don't want a big, long piece of rope here. The idea of this is that the hanging piece or the rope that it's hanging from is not a very long rope. You'll see what I mean once it's hanging on the wall. And when it's all done, this is what it looks like hanging on the wall in my office/guest bedroom. I really love the way that this looks. I think it looks super high-end and very cool. And it definitely elevated that typical tapestry that was just kind of thumbtacked onto the wall. I do have a steamer coming, by the way, so if you're thinking, oh my god, it's so wrinkled, just know that I do have that steamer coming from Amazon, and I should have it in a couple days. It's a kind of a cool handheld steamer. I'll link that one below for you too. And then also, if you're noticing that lamp that's in that upper right hand corner, that lamp was inspired by a DIYer by the name of McKenna. She actually made this on her channel, and I made it about a year ago on my channel and gave her full credit. But again, as you can see, it is one of these projects that I love so much. I've kept it throughout the year, and it is now going to be in my guest bedroom. I will link her channel below, and if you do go and check out her channel, please give her a heads up that the Crafty DIY guy sent you. I love this. It is such a cool, chic touch to my office guest bedroom.